There's a moment you'll never forget, the first time someone twisted your words in front of others. Their voice louder than yours, their frame tighter, their smile smug, and you scrambled. You tried to explain, clarify, prove. You thought logic would save you, that if you just showed them who you really are, they'd back off. But they didn't, because they never cared about the truth. They only wanted control, and in that moment, you gave it to them. You handed them the frame, the audience, the silence. You thought your words would set you free. But all they did was prove you needed them. You felt that sting, the cold pause after your defense, the eyes scanning you, the smirks. That sinking voice inside whispering, "Why do I always end up looking weak?" This video isn't here to make you feel better. It's here to break that cycle, not by teaching you to speak better, but by showing you when not to speak at all. Because what if silence wasn't a sign of defeat? What if it was the most powerful weapon you've never been taught to use? Let's begin. You think you're defending your truth, but what you're really doing is defending their version of you. The second you open your mouth to explain, you've already accepted their rules, their stage, their timing, their spotlight, and no matter how sharp your words are, you're now playing their game, because here's the harsh reality. The person who frames the moment owns it. They say you're arrogant, you say you're confident. They say you're fake, you say you're just misunderstood. But do you see it? Every word you speak is a reaction. And every reaction confirms their power to provoke you. People don't remember your explanation, they remember that you needed one. That's the tragedy of defense. It doesn't fix perception, it affirms it. You thought you were clarifying. But all they saw was a crack that told them, you're not sure of yourself. You still need approval. You can feel that, can't you? That tight chest when you try to explain your heart to someone who already decided not to hear it. That frustration after a message, a comment, a look, where no matter what you say, it sounds like guilt. Because it's not about truth, it's about frame. Imagine this, you walk into a room, someone throws a subtle jab. Maybe it's about your ambition, your silence, your past, and they say it just loud enough for the others to hear. Everyone turns to you, waiting, expecting. Most people would try to fix it, smooth it over, make things right. But what if you didn't? What if you held your posture, kept your face unreadable, and let the tension float? The room would start to shift, because now they're not sure. Are you ignoring them? Are you calculating? Did they just step into something they weren't ready for? And that's the shift. From explanation to presence, from defense to dominance, because silence forces others to fill in the blanks, and they usually overestimate you. That's the secret. You don't win by proving you're right. You win by making it dangerous for others to assume you're wrong. Let's go deeper. Silence is not the absence of words. It's the presence of control. When you don't react, people start to notice more than just your silence. They notice how still you are, how composed, how dangerous you suddenly seem, because in a world where everyone rushes to respond, the one who stays silent becomes something else entirely, unpredictable, untouchable. Ethan learned this the hard way. After getting torn down in that team meeting, he went quiet, not because he didn't have something to say, but because he was tired of losing every time he opened his mouth. At first, the silence felt like weakness. But then something strange started happening. People began second-guessing the guy who insulted him. They wondered if Ethan was planning something. If maybe he saw through the entire game and just didn't care enough to play it. The more he stayed silent, the more control he gained, not with force, but with stillness. You see, humans hate the unknown, and silence creates mystery. It turns a simple insult into a question, a performance into discomfort. Because now, they don't know where you stand, they can't read you, and when they can't read you, they hesitate. They tread carefully, they watch their words. That's when you become powerful, not because you said something brilliant, but because you made them feel something uncertain. That uncertainty, that's your leverage. You're not defending. You're letting the room do the thinking for you, and in that space, people talk to themselves. They start to wonder if they crossed a line, if they looked too emotional, if they made a mistake. And they start shrinking, not because you attacked, but because you didn't. Power doesn't always show up with noise. Sometimes it walks in quietly, sits down, and says nothing. And that's what changes everything. The room always pays attention to the one who doesn't need it. And when you learn to master silence, you don't just hold presence, you command it. That's the art, not reacting. Just being. Let's keep going. Melissa built her company from scratch. 29, sharp, disciplined, quiet. She wasn't loud in meetings. Didn't network to be liked. She just executed. And that alone was enough for people to call her manipulative. It started small, whispers in the hallway, a passive-aggressive comment during a Q&A. Then one day, a tweet went viral. She doesn't actually care about the team, she just wants control. The old Melissa might have written a long post, explaining her side, apologizing if she came across wrong, trying to smooth things over, but not this time. This time, she said nothing, no quote tweets, no clarifications, no statements, just silence, and at first, the room went wild. People speculated, they pushed harder, but after a while, that silence became unsettling, because it said something louder than any apology ever could. It said, "You don't even matter enough for me to respond." The crowd started to shift. Not toward sympathy, but toward curiosity. They started asking themselves, why isn't she reacting? Is she planning something? Maybe that attack was out of line. The attacker kept posting, kept talking, kept pushing. And the more they spoke, the more desperate they looked. Suddenly, it wasn't Melissa under the microscope. It was them, because the public doesn't watch accusations, they watch reactions, and silence, when held with calm, turns the entire frame. This is what most people never understand. You don't need to control the narrative, you need to control your presence. You don't have to play defense, you just have to make them question whether the game is even worth playing. Melissa didn't need a press release. She had posture, stillness, unbothered presence, and that was enough. Because the truth is, in the court of public opinion, being loud doesn't mean you're right, and being quiet doesn't mean you're guilty. It means you've chosen not to enter the courtroom at all, and that's the real move. The strongest response is the one they can't argue with: silence. Let's break it open further. The moment you don't defend yourself, something shifts, not in you. In them, they expect a fight. They're ready for noise, emotion, desperation. But when none of that comes, they start to fold inward. This isn't silence for the sake of being passive. It's psychological warfare, because silence triggers doubt. Not yours, theirs. Cognitive dissonance. That's the name of the weapon. When someone attacks and you stay calm, detached, still, their brain starts to fight itself. They begin wondering, did I go too far? Why aren't they reacting? Am I the one who looks emotional now? They replay their words. Watch your face. Feel the weight of their own tone echoing back at them. And they hate that, because silence acts like a mirror. It reflects their intentions, their emotion, their instability back at them, and most people can't handle that reflection. You didn't raise your voice, you didn't explain yourself, you just let them sit in their own storm. And in that stillness, they begin to unravel, trying to reframe, to justify, to regain control of the moment. But it's gone, they lost it the second you refuse to play. Ethan saw this with a coworker who tried to bait him into reacting during a presentation. A sly remark about his leadership style, a smirk, the kind meant to get under your skin, but Ethan just looked at him, held eye contact, didn't blink. Didn't smile, didn't speak, and the room shifted, not because the insult was clever, but because the lack of response felt powerful. The attacker stumbled through the next few slides, lost his rhythm, his tone cracked. That's what happens when you turn someone's performance into their own collapse. No fight, no words, just presence. People think strength is about striking back, but true control is the ability to hold still while others lose balance. You don't need to prove you're unshaken. You show it by staying rooted while the storm rages around you. And when they realize they can't make you flinch, they begin to flinch for you. Let that sink in. They brought the fire. But you brought the absence of air. That's how you extinguish them without ever raising your hand. Let's take it one level deeper. There's a difference between being respected and being unshakable. One is given by others. The other is carved from silence. Most people try to build their power through performance. They speak more. They clarify more. They fight harder, louder, faster. But those who carry real presence, they do less, and somehow they get more. Not because of what they say, but because of what they withhold. Ethan started to notice this. After months of trying to prove himself, to fix how people saw him, he finally stopped talking. He didn't become distant. He became still, grounded. Measured, and without warning, the energy around him changed. People leaned in more when he did speak. His pauses carried weight. His glances redirected entire meetings, not because he demanded attention, but because his stillness created tension. He didn't chase presence, he became it. That's the aura no one teaches you, the kind that doesn't need defense. Because it doesn't allow offense. There's no hand to grab, no button to push, no angle to exploit. You're not hiding. You're simply not offering access, and people respect that. They start watching what they say around you. They choose their tone more carefully. They treat you like someone who sees more than they reveal. Because you do. That's the evolution. You go from proving your value to becoming the room's reference point. When you walk in, they adjust. Not because you're loud, but because they've learned to expect something different, something they can't quite define, and that uncertainty is power, not the kind that demands attention, the kind that commands silence. You become a gravity. Not noise, not charm, not image, presence. And when you live like that, you don't have to speak to make them listen. You don't have to fight to win the moment, because your existence becomes the move. Now, let's sharpen the edge. Not all silence is stillness. Some silence is a blade. There's a moment when you stop reacting, not out of fear, but out of precision. You don't just hold back. You flip the frame. You let their weapon collapse in their hands. They say you're arrogant. You look at them, calm, composed, and say, strange how confidence makes people so uncomfortable. They say you're manipulative. You nod slightly. Only people who can't be influenced say that. They say you're fake. You give a soft shrug. Everyone says that when they stop getting what they want. You didn't explain. You reframed. You made their attack look like a confession, and now they're the ones scrambling, because the real game isn't defense. It's inversion. You don't block the punch. You let them swing through empty air, and in doing so, they overextend. They lose balance. They fall into themselves. Ethan began doing this without even trying. He stopped answering accusations with justification. He started using them as mirrors. When someone called him too quiet to lead, he smiled and replied, "I guess calm people make loud ones nervous." Just like that, the jab turned into a reveal. Not of him, of them. That's the turn. You stop being the one who reacts. You become the one who reveals. Because when you stay still long enough, people reveal who they are trying to provoke you. And when you respond with subtle, detached precision, you don't just neutralize the attack. You flip it. It's psychological judo. Their emotional energy redirected back at them. Their words weaponized against their own image, and all you did was stay calm. This is the art of the redirect. It requires restraint, not passivity, but cold intention. You don't lash out, you don't plead, you don't freeze, you let the accusation float. You let it echo, and then you cut through it with one sharp line, not to win the crowd, but to end the scene, because the longer you let someone perform, the more obvious their desperation becomes, and with one clean sentence, you shift the power without ever raising your voice. That's how the strong speak, rarely, precisely, with edges. Now let's go even colder. The most dangerous man in the room isn't the one who speaks the most. It's the one who doesn't need to speak at all. You want to end the noise. Disappear, not as a retreat, but as a mirror. When someone insults you and you don't reply, don't block them, don't engage, just go still, gone. Let your absence echo louder than any argument. This breaks people in ways they never expect. Because most attacks aren't about hurting you, they're about pulling you in. They want your reaction, your attention, your energy. Take that away. And they unravel, they post more, they talk to others, they get louder, more emotional, trying to summon you back into the scene, but you're already gone, and that absence, it exposes their obsession. Ethan once dealt with someone who tried to ruin his name online. Public call-outs, private messages, false stories. He didn't respond, he didn't defend, he didn't even acknowledge. And what happened? The other person spiraled, posting daily, tagging him, trying everything, and the silence, it made them look small, loud, desperate, because people began asking, why are you still talking about him if he's not even replying? That's when the shift happens. You stop being the villain in their story, you become the ghost, the mirror, the absence they can't escape. And every new post they write, every new attack they launch, only makes you look stronger, not because you proved anything, but because they collapsed trying to get a reaction you never gave. That's how you make silence unbearable. Not for you, for them, because power is never loud, it's never reactive, it doesn't chase, power walks away and lets the noise burn itself out. And when they finally realize you're not coming back into the fight, that's when they lose. Let's turn now to how you sharpen silence into dominance. There's something colder than silence. It's the aura you build when silence becomes your identity. This isn't just about holding your tongue. It's about sculpting presence, a kind of presence that makes people hesitate before they speak your name. Ethan didn't just stop responding. He refined his posture, his voice lowered, his pace slowed, his expressions vanished, and without ever saying it, he became someone people didn't want to cross. He wasn't feared because he fought. He was feared because no one could predict what he might do if he ever decided to. That's the shift from silence to myth. People start filling in the blanks, inventing strengths you haven't shown, attributing depth to your calm. They say things like, he must know something, or he's too composed, I wouldn't push him. And the beauty is, you've said nothing, you've done less, and yet they assume more, because the less they understand you, the more powerful you become in their imagination. Now, look at what happens in public settings. Someone throws a jab across a table, a subtle mock, a disguised insult. The room goes quiet. Everyone waits for your reaction. You give them a pause, a slight smile, a slow breath, then nothing, not a word, not a shift, just stillness, and the room moves. Not away from you, but around you. Now it's the attacker who feels heat, the weight of silence turning against them. They begin to explain, to soften their tone, to backtrack, because your silence didn't end the scene, it rewrote it. And this is what most people will never master. That presence isn't built by being impressive. It's built by being unreadable when people can't decode you. They prepare for the worst, they speak less, they guess more, and in every guess you rise. You become not just respected, but protected, because people don't provoke what they can't predict. So when you stop defending, you start defining. Not with words, with weight, with quiet, with the kind of calm that makes noise tremble. Now, one final step remains. Let's finish it. The final evolution isn't silence, it's definition. It's when you stop reacting altogether. Not because you're numb, but because your image is already carved, stone by stone, through stillness, restraint, and precision. You no longer defend, you no longer explain, you no longer engage unless it shifts the power, and when you do speak, the room listens, not because they want to, but because they feel they should. That's when you've crossed the line. The one where you're not in the conversation, you are the conversation. Your name becomes a presence, your silence becomes a stance, and your every word, a move. Ethan didn't get there overnight. He trained himself. He let the small jabs pass. He stopped trying to be understood. He chose stillness, again and again, until stillness became his language. And now, he doesn't worry about reputation, because he has something more powerful, aura, the kind of aura that makes people think twice. The kind that rewrites rooms before you even arrive. the kind that doesn't demand respect, it absorbs it. That's what happens when you no longer fight to be right, when you stop chasing clarity, when you realize truth doesn't need volume, it needs posture. Let others talk, let them circle, let them reach, you don't move. Because when you stop defending, you rise, not in noise, but in weight, and in that weight, they feel it. You're no longer someone to debate, you're someone to consider, no longer someone to fix, you're someone to follow. That's what happens when silence is no longer your defense, it becomes your signature. So from this moment forward, don't play the game, be the one they can't even start the game against. Let them wonder, let them wait, let them watch. Because when you become a man of silence, you don't need to be heard to be remembered.